Welcome, everybody, back to the Acres of Diamonds podcast, where we have powerful conversations with interesting people. And I would like to welcome today's guest, Toby Hansen. And Toby is a military veteran and former director of learning and development, excelling in leadership, development, and organizational learning. Toby is currently the program manager and senior analyst. We just got that correct at Citi. So, Toby, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, DJ. It's a blessing and an honor to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, well, you are welcome, and I'm excited to dive in today. Off the record, Toby and I had a conversation a couple days ago, and we talked for 45 minutes. And I was like, "All right, we gotta save some of this content to give it to some of the people here." So, one of the things that I wanted to start with was in the business that I'm a part of, we have talked about this model of like starting from point A and getting to point B. And a lot of the times we want that path to be a straight line, right? We don't want it to be scary. We don't want it to be up and down when really it is up and down and it's backwards. And sometimes that point B happens a lot farther or in a longer duration of time than we might necessarily want it to be. And so when Toby and I were kind of talking offline, he mentioned this idea of the second chance warrior. And this is what I kind of connected to this point A to point B type of work. And when he described it, he said, there's nothing in life that happens or that you do which you cannot have a second chance from. Will it be easy? No. But you can get through it. Yes. So, Toby, I wanted to ask you, where did the inspiration behind this idea come from?
So, DJ, I've been chewing on that for quite a bit of time. I've been through some significant emotional events throughout my lifetime. My time in the military, through that, a divorce, another marriage, children, and I've had friends that have gone through things just as difficult, if not harder, than I've gone through. Mm-hmm. And everybody deals with things differently. But the thing that people don't understand is nothing is an absolute. Mm. So that second chance is what you have to remember. Right? Just because you do something, you say something, something is done to you, that is not your absolute in life. Mm. That's not where your story ends. You have a second chance to begin to write a new story. But if you continue to live in the past, the story won't change. It'll just replay itself over and over. And that's where people get caught in this rut where they feel they cannot escape. Mm-hmm. And it affects them physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and it drives them down when other people should be lifting them up. So that's where the second chance warrior thing kind of comes in.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody is, so I love that, right? The absolute, right? Because it makes me think of like in math when they talked about like absolute values and things like that. So let's picture somebody is in a situation where something unfortunate has happened to them, right? And they are in this sort of life rut. What would you do to help them help themselves get out of it?
You have to work through the issue. There are two things that people have a really hard time doing: forgiving others, but more importantly, forgiving themselves. Mm. Right? So you do something or something is done to you, right? However it happens, forgiveness is a huge piece. That doesn't discredit the act. That doesn't discredit the event. It happened. It was real. But if you cannot forgive both whoever did it to you or whatever the event that happened and yourself to know that either it wasn't my fault, I didn't cause it, right? Or, you know what? I've asked for forgiveness from the person, but I have guilt. And the longer that you hold that guilt and you don't forgive yourself to move on, then that's the rut that you will stay in. So you have to work through that process of understanding we're not discrediting what happened. You can't take it back. you cannot go back and replay. As far as I know, we don't have time machines yet.
Yet.
But moving forward, you don't let it be a staple in your life every single day.
Mhm. So why do we have such a hard time forgiving ourselves?
Because we're human, and that's how we're designed. We don't have this piece of us that goes, whatever, it happened. And now, are there people like that? Of course. There are people that they can say something and they turn and walk away, and the conversation never happens.
Mm-hmm.
They can do something and they can drive away, and whatever happened never happened.
Mm-hmm.
But 90% of us are not designed that way.
Mm-hmm.
When we go to sleep, it will come back up in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When you're driving or when you have a conversation, certain aspects of what happened, what was said, what was done to you, what you did to someone else, something will remind you of that.
Mm-hmm.
A prime example is soldiers have a very hard time transitioning back from war, Iraq, Afghanistan, when they're driving and things on the side of the road explode.
Mm-hmm.
When they get back home and they drive, they have a fear that if something is on the side of the road, it will explode. And they haven't removed or detached the location of one from the other.
Mm-hmm.
The event of driving and something exploding happens everywhere, not in one country to the next, home or abroad.
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't detached those two things that have occurred, whether it was a significant incident with loss of life and they had to work through that process, or it was a near scare and they came out on the other side, no one was injured, some equipment was damaged, but it's still a scare when something explodes next to you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I mean really by being able to separate the two instances. You're not saying it never happened, right? But you're getting through it and past it and moving on.
Toby, that's a great example. One, and two, I think what you highlight in that example is the fact that there will be evidence in our life that will cause us to be triggered by certain events.
Correct.
And sometimes that evidence could be 1 out of 100 scenarios, but it was such a powerful little piece of evidence that every time that thing happens again now, we immediately get triggered. Oh my God, is it that 1 out of 100? Right? Like I have an example that I use with some of our clients about when my mom texts me and says, call me. Right? It's just an event. It's merely neutral. And she has done that 1,000 times to me. Right? And 999 of them have been completely fine. Yet there was one time where it wasn't fine. Right? We had lost a family member and they were telling me. And so that one time has just enough trigger to where it kind of creates a little bit of anxiety. But to your point, then I work through it, right? It's probably going to be okay and it's probably going to be fine, right? So I think that's an awesome example. And I think what it also brings up is something that we talked a little bit about offline was this idea between like incidents versus systematic problems, which I really liked kind of the way that you described it. And I would love for you to kind of dive a little bit deeper into that and kind of connect it to that why statement that you were saying of like, hey, why did this actually happen?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to caveat what you said about your mom and the text, right? In order to alleviate the stress that you have from that incident, you have the ability to communicate to your mom and say, hey, from now on, I love that you text call me because I love to talk to you. Mm-hmm. Put a heart emoji at the end or put a smiley face at the end, just so I know everything's all good. If that's not there, then I know that there's an issue. And it's literally one extra space and one extra emoji for her to send to you.
That is
but remove that stigma for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. I'm gonna have her listen to this episode so she can start doing that.
Perfect. So going back to the incident versus the systemic problem, right? In leadership, if leadership was easy, everyone would do it, number one.
Yep.
But when leading other people, you have to know the difference between an incident and a systemic problem. And you have to address them differently. And the why is all about relationship. So, as a leader, if you build a solid relational foundation with the people that you work with, the people who work for you, and the people that you work for through communication, you can alleviate a lot of the issues. Now, is there going to be 10%? Yes, because as a leader, you devote 90% of your time to send 10% of the people, right? It's just the fact of life. It's that 90-10 rule. You can apply it to everything. But when you do this, say I have Jane, and Jane works for me, and she is a great employee, always gets her work in on time. I never have an issue with her. She's always prompt to work. If there is going to be something, she sends a message to either myself or a coworker, and then I'm briefed. And then one day, Jane just doesn't show up. Comes in 3 hours late, doesn't say anything to anybody, goes to her desk, sits down, and starts working. Now, there are two ways you can handle it. You can go to Jane, absolutely irate, because she hasn't been here for 3 hours. Nobody has talked to her. There is no explanation for why she was late, and treat it as though she systemically does this every single day. Right? Or you can walk to Jane and go, "Hey, are you okay? This isn't like you. Is everything okay? Is there something that you would like to share with me that I can assist you?" And then Jane may or may not feel led to, "Yes, X happened. I'm very sorry. I didn't even think about calling. I was so focused on the significant emotional event that had occurred. It won't happen again," right? That's your opportunity as a leader to sympathize and empathize, depending on which one. If you can relate, great. If not, then just give Jane grace, make sure that her family or whatever the incident that happened is okay, and ask her if she needs to go home for the rest of the day to make sure that all things are taken care of. But then you have that other employee that once a week, once every 2 weeks, they're 25, 30 minutes late. Something always gets blamed. There's no communication. It's a different excuse every single time. Now you have a systemic problem that continues and continues and continues. And if you don't take action as a leader, then you're essentially saying it's okay, no problem. Right? So those are the two differences. The relational piece versus the person is taking advantage of your willingness to be understanding of situations, and how, like a kid, we'll see how far they can go. How much rope will you give me until the rope runs out?
Yep. And it also it establishes a standard, right? And it establishes an expectation. And I've heard a saying, you get what you tolerate. Right. So as a leader, if we are tolerating people coming in late, and we are not taking that empathetic and sympathetic approach to saying, "Hey, everything all right, this isn't like you," and actually allowing them to realize that we care about not only their performance, but also them as a human being, that person who does continually keep coming in, they're going to say, "Well, it doesn't really matter, right? I'm not going to get in trouble for it. This is okay." Right. And so I think what you also outlined was the difference between emotionally intelligent leadership versus emotionally unintelligent leadership. Right. And so the emotionally unintelligent would just get irate, get angry, and not necessarily see the deeper why. And the EQ leadership would treat them as seen, heard, and understood. Right. And so I think the area that I want to focus on now is you said something around solid relational foundation, which I think is fantastic. I remember my father talking to me when I was younger about relationships, right? And leaders are really good with building relationships. And so as leaders, what can we do to create those solid relational foundations?
So as a leader that wants to create those foundations, you have to be willing to listen.
Mm.
You have to be willing to ask questions and sit back and listen and remember what the answer is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Find out now, are there boundaries? Of course.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have an employee that has kids, what school do they go to? How old are they? Do they play sports? Right? Because then you're creating a bond. Oh, hey, my kid plays soccer too. Where do they play at? Now you're creating this relational foundation, right? And you can do that through a multitude of scopes across the board with single employees, with married employees. If single employees are into sports and they like chicken wings, hey, what kind of chicken wings?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a wings and things guy, or man, this Mexican restaurant down the street has amazing dry rub chicken wings, and nobody would ever think that they had great dry rub, but I ordered 25 of those, and that's what I'll eat during the game. Right? So you have to understand the importance of building a relationship, meeting the employee where they are, so that when the time comes that something happens, they're willing to share or they're willing to communicate with you of, hey, here's what's going on. I need some help, because you created that bond with them.
Yeah, like that trust is valuable enough, right? That trust is actually tangible, right? And I can even think about like teams that I've been on where whether it was a coach, whether it was a teacher, whether it was a boss, where they created that trust to where I could say, hey, can you help me with this? Like, you were okay with actually showing a little bit of vulnerability because I knew that I wasn't going to get destroyed for saying, hey, I'm not 100%.
Right.
Right. Which I think is really important. And I think too, as leaders, we have to remember that we are essentially humans leading other humans, right? We're not really managers leading employees. We're all humans when it comes down to it, right? And one of the things that you had said, kind of offline too, was the hours outside of work affect the hours inside of work.
100%.
Right. Which I think is it's a simple thing to think about, but when you actually like stop and say, like, literally think about that, right? In an 8-hour workday, right, we still have 16 other hours of our day, right? And so we're going to go home and we're going to be dads and we're going to be moms. We're going to be brothers and sisters and daughters and sons, right? We wear other hats.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think as leaders, if we understand that, we can then change the way that we really develop these relationships with people.
Yes, absolutely.
So one of the things too that I wanted to hit on was kind of shifting our perspective from leadership, and let's shift it to the employees and the actual workforce community. Okay. What do you think they truly need from their leaders? And I think I already kind of know the answer because we kind of hit on a little bit, but what do you think they truly need from their leaders and from their organizations to be ridiculously successful in their positions?
Yeah, support them. I mean, the bottom line is if you are managing someone, then your thought process is all about the bottom line, the project, the Excel spreadsheet, the form, the PowerPoint, right? Those are things that you manage, but you lead people, right? So you have to be bold.
Like that.
But you have to separate the two. Because if you treat a person like the spreadsheet, mm-hmm. then that's the emotional investment you're going to get both going and coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, spreadsheets don't really have emotions.
They don't. It's the bottom line.
Yeah.
The numbers are the numbers. Read the meter. The meter doesn't lie, right?
Yeah.
support them in a human, like you said before, a human and relational way versus I only support you in a manager way with the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that you don't have to do that, right? Because we have to teach, coach, and mentor to do their job correctly. But leading in a human way has to be incorporated into that. And if you don't support them in that, they will find another job. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
Good people don't quit good jobs, they quit good leaders or bad leaders. Sorry.
So, yep. And I completely agree with that. And I think too, it's important for us to realize, like, I ask a lot of like people, hey, what is the thing that you love the most about your business and working there? Majority of the time, it's the people. Mm-hmm. Like the work is kind of just there. It's the thing that they have to do to ultimately provide value to whoever they're servicing. Right. And the thing that they remember, at least when I ask them a question, is that emotional connection with others. Right. And I bet you this is probably a fairly similar connection to your time in the military, but I can think about my time on like college football teams. I don't remember the actual, I mean, I remember the tough days of workouts and summer workouts and things like that, but I remember the camaraderie, right? Mm-hmm. I remember the emotional connections, the emotional highs and the emotional lows, right? With the players and the coaches, right? So it's that human element that we need as humans to ultimately get to where we want to go. Right.
And those people should be a foundation that gets you over things that happen. That should be your support system.
Oh, yeah.
That you've known for 15, 20 years, that you've created the relationship enough with that you can turn to them and go, hey, this is what's going on. I need to talk. Mm-hmm. Right? Because we tag people in our lives as friends, but how many friends do you have that you would be willing to tell them that you did something that you're very embarrassed about, that you're not proud of, and that may at some point affect you monetarily, jail time, whatever it may be? How many friends do you really have that you can turn to them and say, hey man, this is what happened, I need your help? Yeah. How many would show up? Those are the true friends that you built over time, that you have a relational, a foundation of relationship with, that will drop whatever they have and they will be there. Mm-hmm. And then there are acquaintances. Those are what most people consider friends, which are acquaintances. Mm-hmm. But if you call them in a hard time, it's ghosts. You see nobody, no one shows up, right? So yeah,
one of my father's told me before that not everybody can sit in your front row, right? Not everybody has, those 5 to 6 individuals where it's like, I mean, however big that circle is on you, and that's kind of your own call, right? And I think that those individuals, to your point, those are the ones that you have intentionally and consciously decided to build that relational foundation with, because of some sort of connection that you felt with that person, right? And I think that is a huge element to us being our own kind of individual leaders as well. And so one of the things too that I just thought of was I did a podcast last week, and I asked our guest how could we improve our emotional resilience? And one of her answers was getting a support system, and a support system that like actually worked and you actually cared about. And that's why I think it's so important too to surround yourself with people who elevate you, right? They are engines in your life. They're not necessarily anchors in your life. And so, I completely agree with that, Toby. And one thing that I wanted to hit on too, because since you have such a long lineage of learning and development and a great understanding of kind of this emotionally intelligent leadership, what have you seen from programs or certain strategies or tactics that have really helped people learn and develop?
That's a good question. You have to meet the people where they are and understand what type of learner they are. Mm-hmm. So, prime example that I'll give is in a company that I've worked for in the past, they use a lot of documents. and the documents were updated over time, but that was their deliverable to learn. Mm-hmm. And if you fast forward to current time, you have to go a generation or two prior to right now that learns that way. So if you're not meeting current people that are struggling with things, current people that need to get over something, current people that are having emotional, mental, physical stress and strain, if you're not meeting them where they're at, they won't be willing to listen to the product that you're giving. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's why our bandwidth varies. My 18-year-old son who's in college can sit and watch reels all day long, right? They're 30 seconds, 45 seconds long, boom, on to the next one, again. Well, that's great. So are we designing something in today's day and age that lasts 30 to 45 seconds that can make their brain go, you know what? I have that in my life. Huh. And now they think. Mm-hmm. If it lasts more than 3 minutes, it's all over. You lost it.
I'm so happy you said that, because I think that is such an important thing to communicate to other people, because we all subscribe to like different emails and different newsletters, right? And blogs and things. And we're reading things that are 3, 4, 5 pages long. It's like, I don't have 45 minutes to just sit there and read an email, right? Or read a blog or read this, right? I have to actually plan this into my day if I actually want to absorb this. Right. And so one of the things we say at our business is be brief, be brilliant, and be gone. Like, literally tell me what you're going to say and then get the hell out of here. Right. 100%. Yeah. It's such an interesting way. Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
As soon as you do that, people will be willing to action.
Yes.
It's right at the forefront of their mind. It's right now and I can go.
Yes. Yeah. Especially with like a visual stimulation too. I mean, a lot of the people we talk to, I'm like, what do you actually want to see? And they're like quick things that just get a very small message across to your son's point that makes me just think a little bit. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to sell you a whole thing right now, but I want you just to think about something. Right, which I think is such a valuable way to really communicate valuable information, right? Like there's some great stuff in that 4 to 5 page email, right? But if you condense it down and just give me the cliff notes of it, it's probably going to be a little bit more easily absorbed.
What's the hook?
Exactly.
Give me the hook. Mm-hmm. Then I may be willing to go get more.
Yes, right? That enticement.
That's it. But we don't do that anymore. Mm-hmm. The generation that controls some of those things for some reason hasn't realized how they can get these really important pieces of information across to people that need it, that are struggling.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're still trying to do it the old way.
Yeah, there's a huge, we personally believe that there's like a huge shift in the way that people will learn and develop, from understanding the quick delivery of it and understanding how to be emotionally intelligent with the leadership of it. Right. And I think those are the two things that can really actually make a dent in helping people learn and develop into their roles. And so, two more quick questions, so that I actually just thought of. What was the most valuable lesson that you got from being in the military?
The most valuable. Trust but verify.
What was that again?
Trust but verify.
Trust but verify. Mm.
We fall into a lull sometimes when we have prior knowledge, right? And leaders do this sometimes too, especially if they have a really high functioning worker in their midst, mm-hmm. right? We trust that person's going to get all their work done. I don't have to review it. They're on cruise control.
Mm-hmm.
And the day that we don't verify that it was done correctly is the day that bites us.
Mm.
It's a presentation that's going to a high level client, right? I trust the person that's doing it. I have no reservations that they won't do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't meet the client's intent. But I never looked at it because I trusted. I didn't verify.
Mm.
There are things in your life that you may trust. You're going on a long car trip. The check tire light comes on. They got low pressure. You're like, it's cold out this morning. It lost a little bit of pressure. Once I get on the road, those tires will heat right back up. It'll go back up to the tire pressure it's supposed to be. Well, you're just trusting what the car told you instead of checking that nail that's in the sidewall of your tire that once you get up to 80 miles an hour is going to explode on the highway. And now what have you caused?
I love that. Trust, trust, but verify. And that also, it connects to this saying I heard a while ago, strong opinions loosely held, which I think is kind of interesting, where we can have these certain beliefs or these certain ideas, or we can trust something. And at the same time, I want to verify it. Right. And I'm okay with people questioning me about these opinions because maybe there's something I don't see. Right. And that's where, if we allow ourselves to be open, we can continue to grow within that realm. So
You need more of that.
right. Yes.
Or people that are willing to go, this is how I feel about this. Why don't we talk about it? What do you think?
Exactly. Right. Because I might be wrong. Right. Right. And I think that's a really important part of leadership too, right? Not seeing a leader who is okay with saying, hey, here's what I think is going on. Here's the way that we could attack this. And I might be wrong. What do we think about this? Right. I think that's a great way to approach it.
And that point that you just brought up builds a strong relationship through buy-in, right? Prime example, I was doing a project. We had to come up with a color and an icon to put on two different pieces of information. It's a color and an icon. But what did I do? I sent a message out to my whole team. I said, hey, here's the color palette. Here's the 15 icons that we can choose from. Why don't you guys get together, give me your 3 best options, and then we'll sit down and talk about it.
Yeah.
Right? Because now they have buy-in. Was the selection theirs to make? No, I could have made it all by myself. But the point of me bringing the entire team in, giving them an option to have a say in something that, yes, in the long run, it's not really that big of a deal. But now they're like, man, this is great. We actually, now when they see it, they know that they had a touch point.
They became part of the solution.
Yes. And that's all people really want. They don't want a dictator.
I love that. I think that is so valuable. All right, Toby, last question here. All right. This is something I'd like to ask everybody as we kind of exit the podcast. What do you want to be remembered for?
I want to be remembered for the heart that I have. I try very hard to meet people where they are, to give even if it hurts, and to support people in their time of need when it may not be the easiest thing for me to do. It may be at an odd hour of the evening. It may interrupt the soccer game that I'm at with my child. It may be in the middle of work and I have to take a few hours off to go and help that person. But having a heart for people and being able to help them through things that they're struggling with, a need that they have, that's what I want others to remember me.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for that, Toby. And thank you so much for your time today on the Acres of Diamonds podcast. We truly appreciate everything that we covered today. It was that was really enjoyable. So thank you so much for your time. And that is officially a wrap for this podcast. Thank you to everybody who decided to tune in and listen to this edition of the Acres of Diamonds podcast, where we have powerful conversations with interesting people. Toby Hansen, thank you so much for your time.